Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the craziness. Let me start at the top on something that I didn't expect to have to raise. Late last night, in an unprecedented move, the Secretary of Defense, I believe at the behest of the 9/11 right-wing blogger Laura Loomer, pulled my oversight meeting I was going to have with the National Geospatial Agency, which is located in Northern Virginia, that was been long scheduled for this Friday. Last decade, I've been either chair or vice chair of the Intelligence Committee. Part of my oversight is visiting the intelligence installations, many of them located in Virginia. It's both my responsibility for oversight, and it's also my responsibility, frankly, as the vast majority of folks that work at these installations are Virginians. I've been to NGA, NRO, CIA, ODNI, a host of other classified sites, and this is just part of the job. I did it during the Trump administration, the first Trump administration. I did it during the Biden administration. So I'd had this on the books for weeks, had been in planning for months, normal course, even a classified meeting. Somehow the information got out to this right-wing blogger who nobody appointed anything, but seems to have the ability to call the national security shots for our country. We've seen Laura Loomer earlier force the firing of the NSA Director General Tim Hawk. We've seen her override or basically be more in charge than Tulsi Gabbard of national intelligence when she forced Gabbard to take away the security clearances of a number of our senior intelligence officials. Now we see her dictating to Pete Hegseth, I guess, because this long-planned meeting has been taken away. I can't do my job, both as senior senator from Virginia with my constituents, or more importantly, in terms of oversight, if I can't visit these facilities. It is unbelievable. I'm going to be meeting with my Republican colleagues this afternoon. I mean, if you got to pass the Laura Loomer litmus test to go visit a federal facility that's in your home state, what in the hell have we come to? But that seems to be the policy, and if Republicans are not willing to stand up and call this outrageous, where do we head? We've already seen Congress's ability to do budgets overridden by the president's power using the OMB as they rescind funding that Congress has approved. Are we going to give up as well all our oversight responsibilities to make sure these functions are reviewed and are acting appropriately? And what I fear is this sends another chilling message to the intelligence community workforce, again, the majority of which live in Virginia, that if they don't bend the knee, their jobs are in jeopardy, their security clearances are in jeopardy. And what is amazing here is I would have been angry if it had been coming from Pete Hegseth directly, but instead Laura Loomer on her right-wing blog has been blasting me all weekend, and now all of a sudden the meeting gets pulled. So is Laura Loomer now both Director of National Intelligence and Secretary of Defense? I think people deserve an answer. This is an unelected official who's already wrought incredible damage to the intelligence community and now into our defense establishment. And again, I think Virginians and Americans deserve better. But this is all just transpired in the last 14, 15 hours. To a quick report, though, on what I thought I was going to talk about today. First of all, I got a chance to, in the last week or so before Labor Day, and in the immediate aftermath of Labor Day, to travel around Southwest, South Side, Hampton Roads, and even a couple of visits around Fredericksburg. And what I heard at virtually every stop was huge concerns about this big ugly bill that is now the law of the land. concerns in Franklin, the city of Franklin, down in Hampton Roads, where huge concerns about their hospital closing. And I'm extraordinarily disappointed with Bon Secours, who runs that hospital, who wouldn't even allow us to have the meeting on hospital grounds, even though they come up and lobby me all the time about, God, this bill is going to cut so deeply into our ability to provide coverage for underserved communities. If these hospital chains are not going to be transparent with their customer base and patients, then we got an even bigger problem. But we all know, I heard it in Franklin, I heard it in Martinsville at a senior center, I heard it particularly in Roanoke, where a group of nonprofits that don't know whether any of their funding is going to continue. They do know that when we throw 300,000 Virginians off of health care from Medicaid cuts, when we potentially will throw another couple 100,000 Virginians out of food assistance from SNAP cuts, when we see dramatic rises in health insurance premiums that Virginians are already getting notices, and these premiums will click in at the beginning of October because the healthcare credits expire at the end of the year, and there's no indication that the Republicans will extend those. We're going to overwhelm our healthcare system. You put 500,000, 600,000 more people into the uninsured bucket, they will overwhelm our emergency rooms. Franklin is one of the hospitals, the 6 hospitals in Virginia that it appears will probably close. 36, 37 nursing homes are scheduled to close as well. It will break our healthcare system, and people are worried. And I think, I'll come to the government funding in a moment, but I think it is critical that we push back. On top of that, I heard from farmers in both Franklin and in Orange County that were really concerned about some of the ag cuts. I mean, remember, the Virginia farmers sell their food many times into programs that then that food goes into this, is purchased by people with the SNAP assistance, with food stamps. They're wondering what's going to happen if those programs are cut. Will the government buy less of this, or will consumers buy less of this? Excuse me, not the government. They're also extraordinarily concerned about this wacky tariff policy, up and down, and it completely robs the ability for Virginia farmers to sell abroad. At the same time, the tariffs are cutting in to the cost of their equipment, the cost of fertilizer. And remember, most Virginians don't realize agriculture is still the #1 industry in Virginia in terms of total market. So when you cut this many farmers and put this much uncertainty in place, you're going to have, they have no idea what's going to happen. And what's going to particularly crush will be small farmers who are either just starting out or who don't have need these farm assistance programs that the large corporate farms, frankly, can get by without. So huge concern from farmers, huge concerns from seniors, again, both at a retirement home and nursing home skilled center down in Martinsville. People are worried. What's going to happen if Medicaid goes away or gets dramatically cut? That affects Medicare. Where do our seniors turn? I think we owe an obligation to those seniors. And then one of the last visits I had was just yesterday afternoon in Fredericksburg with veterans. I can't think of an administration that has been, unfortunately, more veteran unfriendly, both in terms of trying to cut back workers at the VA. We've got 2 beautiful new health centers for veterans, one in Spotsylvania, one down in Chesapeake. Took us 8 years to build them, way too long. They're only a third filled in terms of employees, because who's going to work at the VA with the threat constantly that you're going to have cuts? And on top of that, I just would want to point out, and I think Virginians know this, we've got a lot of veterans in Virginia. About a third of our federal workforce are veterans. And when you've had this DOGE and other efforts just willy-nilly cutting federal workforce, 300,000, as what the administration themselves say they think they will have fired or cut loose before the end of the calendar year, a third of those are going to be veterans. So for all the rhetoric coming out of the White House in terms of actual benefits, health care, and support. Veterans, I think, are furious, and rightfully so. Which brings us back finally to the, we're back in session now. We're moving on the defense bill, but we've got a big date coming up. September 30th, government funding runs out. We have to have a bipartisan budget. If the Republicans try to jam a one-party-only solution, then I think we're probably headed to a shutdown. I hope that's not the case. I desperately want a bipartisan extension and moving into next year's budget. And the Republicans control the White House, the Senate, the House. The only place where they actually need our votes is in the Senate. If they want to work with us, I've always been part of every bipartisan effort going forward, but I am hugely concerned both on their so far unwillingness to even negotiate in a meaningful way. And on top of that, as we've seen, and I mentioned earlier, if Congress is giving up its power of the purse and you sign a budget deal and then the director of OMB, who, remember that Russ Vought, this was the guy that wanted to traumatize the federal workforce. He has done a good job there, but can arbitrarily pick and choose which programs to fund. He just cut another $5 billion approximately of foreign aid out last week with no congressional approval. How do you make sure any deal is going to get honored? I say I'm going to work as hard as I can to make sure we get that bipartisan agreement and we don't have to put our country and the federal workforce through another period of trauma. But it takes two to get, at least in the Senate, it's going to take both sides coming together. And if we need to have that bipartisan approach, and time will see. Matter of fact, there's not even been a meeting yet between President Trump and the congressional leadership, Democrats and Republicans alike. Again, we're in uncharted territory, and it's going to be a bumpy September. Went on a little long, but didn't expect that issue at the top. But it's, again, another outrage. Hope it doesn't fall through the cracks with all the other things happening going on today. But I'll turn it back to you, Val, for questions.
Senator, the first question is from Margaret Barthel with WAMU.
Hi, Senator. Thank you so much for doing this. I wanted to ask, we've been seeing reports about the ICE field office in Chantilly, which apparently is currently, holding people who've been detained as part of the crackdown on immigration in D.C. And, we've been seeing concerns from advocates about detention conditions there. I know you've conducted oversight at Farmville and wonder if you have plans to look at the situation in Chantilly as well.
Yes, I intend to visit, hopefully with Senator Kaine, the Chantilly facility. I did talk to the ICE officials, and they have indicated that folks are there only 24 to 48 hours. I want to hear that directly from the people in Chantilly and, frankly, from some of the folks that have been detained. I remind folks now that ICE has a bigger budget than the FBI. And frankly, we are having all kinds of other law enforcement taken away from fighting crime to also picking up folks. Listen, I think the Democrats messed up on the border. But you can have a secure border and not have ICE officials too often masked picking up moms dropping off kids at daycare or folks going to work. I did visit the facility in Farmville and got a commitment from the private company that shouldn't have any concerns about finances with as large as ICE budget is right now to work on improving both health and food. And there were some simple things like hand sanitizer, things like, milk quality that we're going to stay on top of them to get answers on. But clearly Chantilly, I've got an oversight responsibility is there. But what I worry about, in light of what's happened with the normal course of my job of going out and visiting intelligence locations in Virginia as vice chair of the Intelligence Committee, former chair, where the overwhelming majority are Virginia constituents, if they're trying to preclude me from visiting those facilities, which I've done dozens of times over the last 10 years, I am hopeful that they will not try to restrict Senator Kaine and I's ability to visit this facility in Chantilly. We're trying to get that on the books right now.
Thank you.
Senator, the next question is from Mitchell Miller with WTOP.
Hi, Senator. Thanks a lot for joining us, and welcome back, everybody. Going back to the budget negotiations and the continuing resolution, could you weigh in on your thoughts about the pocket rescission? I know that some of your Republican colleagues have also been critical of it, and I wonder if you think this is poisoning the waters in connection with appropriators.
Yeah, I think at least I'm not saying the president, but I think the OMB director, who's made clear he doesn't want to have bipartisan negotiations, are hoping for a shutdown. And this was a definitive poke in the eye to Congress, not just Democrats, but Republicans as well. I think it's, as the chair of the Appropriations Committee, the Republican senator from Maine, Susan Collins, said, I think it's illegal. But the challenge is, these actions take place, and if they have to be litigated for months in the courts, these funds are not released. I've got a half dozen other projects where I'm trying to work quietly with the administration to get funds released. A particular item of interest for me, Mitchell, as you know, is CDFIs that help bank the underbanked communities, rural and urban, around the country. The Treasury Secretary said he thinks the program is good, but somehow it's caught at OMB. So I think this is provocative. I think it reflects at least some in the White House who want to shut down so they can, frankly, even further ignore Congress. And if my Republican friends don't have, and I work bipartisan, as you know, if my Republican friends don't have the courage to stand up, if they are going to simply roll over, then this completely undermines the Article I powers of Congress. And this isn't about partisanship. This isn't about Democrats, Republicans. This is about whether we're still going to be a representative democracy where Congress has a voice.
Senator, the next question is from Mark Gadd with CBS 19.
Hey, Senator, thanks so much for your time. Just had two super quick questions. Possibility of another government shutdown, and then Republicans are trying to rebrand the Big Beautiful Bill. And so what's your take on what it's meant so far?
Well, I think they're trying to rebrand the Big Ugly Bill because the American people realize this bill takes away millions of Americans' health care. It cuts out food assistance in terms of school lunches, school breakfasts, to pay for a tax cut for the wealthiest. And on top of that, it has a host of other little surprises in there. It limits people's ability to go to college. Healthcare, we need more doctors. You can't, with the restrictions put on student debt in this bill, you can't afford to go to medical school if you're not rich based upon this bill. It even cuts back on the ability of people, not billionaires, to give money, but somebody gives $5,000 to a local nonprofit. It cuts back the ability for folks to deduct those donations. I've seen a lot of bad legislation in my time here as both governor and senator. This is the worst bill I've ever seen. And I don't think trying to put a new name on this bill is going to change people's opinion. It stinks. It is detrimental. It will hurt Virginians. It will hurt Americans. And I think it's got to be changed. And that'll be part of our negotiation. That leads into the conversation about the possibility of a government shutdown. If you want to, I want to avoid a government shutdown. But you're already seeing this administration arbitrarily shut down parts of the government it doesn't like without congressional approval. There's got to be a bipartisan deal here, and it's got to be guaranteed that you don't, once you sign your name and vote for something, that the OMB director doesn't just on his own whim cut programs. So it's going to be a tense time. But if we don't stand up now, if we don't push back now, when will you ever count on the federal government for anything going forward? And that undermines trust in our authority, and again, it undermines trust in, frankly, I would argue even the presidency. If we're going to turn Donald Trump into an arbitrary individual that can decide all issues, I don't think even the majority of folks who voted for Donald Trump for president thought they were buying that. And I think we're going to have a spirited debate. But there's not going to be a rollover here with simply putting a rubber stamp on these policies.
Senator, the next question is from Megan Polly with Virginia Public Media.
Hi, Senator. I'm speaking with Head Start centers in Virginia about concerns about the ban on undocumented enrollment. I know there's a stay on enforcement and application until September 10th. Just wondering what you've heard, if you've heard anything on that front about any potential guidance coming out next week, or if the Trump administration plans to reverse course there, and then also more generally, just what you're hearing from.
Well, listen, I at the beginning of the administration, Head Start funding was frozen for a few weeks. And appropriately, families and Head Start programs flipped out. They are still, the funding got restored because we put a lot of pressure on. Bipartisan, I should add. I think they're trying to go at Head Start another time. They think in the middle of this whole budget crisis, if they dramatically restrict who can get Head Start, I think they hope they'll be able to shut down some of these programs. And again, for folks who are folks in America, if they go to school unprepared, their chances of getting in trouble, of not completing their education, go down dramatically. You want to target certain Head Start reforms? I've got ideas on trying to make sure we focus Head Start more on making kids school ready. But that's not what they're doing. This is again, I think coming up mostly out of OMB again, a direct attack on Head Start, and they're hoping with some of these guidance or lack of guidance, they will so mess up the programs that some of these programs will disappear.
Senator, the next question is from Abigail Coleman with WSOS.
Hi, Senator. Thank you so much. I just wanted to ask, I know you touched on this a little bit, but could you expand a little bit more about that visit to the Farmville Detention Center and specifically your talks with Kilmar and just what you really want to see moving forward?
Listen, Mr. Garcia, I gave him letters from his family. He was obviously very emotional about that. I think he felt secure in the facility. That was good news. I think he is very concerned that since DHS had already made one mistake and sent him to El Salvador illegally, he feels very much that they are trying to pressure him to pleading guilty on some of the charges against him. And I have no idea about the validity of those charges. That is a separate matter. But there is a due process here. And what they threaten, what he relates is if he pleads guilty, they'll deport him to some place like Costa Rica. If he doesn't plead guilty, they're going to try to deport him to Uganda, where he has no ties, no knowledge. He's never been to Africa. So he ought to go through the criminal proceedings at the appropriate time. But the first thing here is, do anybody in America have due process? And there's hearings scheduled in, I think, early October. And we ought to have that proceeding play out and then move forward on the criminal proceeding. But and I'd say on the greater issue of detainees, there are a number of these individuals. Some probably belong there, but there were a number that had no prior criminal record. They were picked off the street. They had barely any chance to communicate back with their family. And while the conditions, I think there are conditions. I've been in a lot of jails and prisons. It wasn't by any means the worst. It wasn't the best. But I do think there are some basic things like not having curdled milk or making sure that you've got hand sanitizer and some of these things are not going to break the bank, but at least allow some level of humane treatment for these detainees.
Senator, the final question today is from Nicholas Benson with the Falls Church News Press. Nicholas, are you there?
Hello, Senator. Sorry, I got on the call late. Did you address the issue of the Laura Loomer cancellation of your meeting
Yes.
with the intelligence community earlier in your call?
Yeah, I did, but let me give you the top line really quickly because it's outrageous. Who appointed Laura Loomer, the guardian of our defense and intelligence community? And it seems like she has more power than Tulsi Gabbard or Pete Hegseth. I've been doing these meetings at our intelligence agencies for more than a decade. I've been part of the leadership chair or vice chair of the Intelligence Committee that whole time. The vast majority of these individuals are Virginians. And if you have to pass the Laura Loomer litmus test to be able to go visit a federal facility in your state, which you have direct responsibility over from oversight, then we have destroyed the role of congressional oversight because I'm not sure anyone will meet the muster. And if my Republican colleagues don't join me in pushing back, then I think the whole concept of congressional oversight could go away. And remember, when you cook the books in the intelligence world, people die. That's what happened with the Iraq War. We've made dramatic reforms, but if you move the intelligence community back to where its goal is to simply support Donald Trump's agenda, no matter how out there, no matter how much it refutes factual basis, then our country is not only less safe, but we are in uncharted territory.
Would you say the same thing about all of the intelligence community people who've been denied their clearances in the last couple of weeks?
If you look, Nick, at the number of intelligence professionals, this wasn't Laura Loomer's first crazy rant. You know, this is the NSA director got fired. 37 individuals lost their security clearance. I would imagine when the DIA in general got fired, it probably was because of Loomer as well. This, right-wing fraud, again, remember 9/11 denier, she, seems to have great admiration for white nationalists. If she is calling the shots in our defense and intelligence community right now, as it appears she has, and nobody appointed her or elected her to anything, I think she's probably so out there they won't give her a job, but she's calling the shots. And if that's where this policy is headed, again, this is a brave new world, and it's not a good new world.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.